$62, that is what the state of Alaska charged Cole Harrington per year to live on land he owned in the Matanuska-Susitna borough. Not $62 a month, $62 a year the year before. The bill had been $3,840. Same 5 acres of spruce and birch ground he bought in 2019 for $22,000, assessed annually by the borough, whether he built on it or not. Cole worked pipeline construction outside Wasilla at $28 an hour. The math on building a permitted home in rural Alaska never worked. Construction costs run $300 a square foot, and a permitted structure triggers a reassessment that raises the bill further. So he read the statute instead. 6 months after he found a single clause buried in the borough assessor's classification manual, he was living in a fully insulated, wood-heated shipping container on that same parcel. The borough assessor had no record of a structure on his land. This is exactly how he did it. Cole Harrington bought his parcel in the Matanuska-Susitna borough in the spring of 2019, 5 acres of mixed spruce and birch ground off a gravel road north of Wasilla. He paid $22,000 for it, cash from 3 years of pipeline work, and the plan was straightforward enough. Build on it eventually, hold it in the meantime. Land in the Mat-Su Valley had been appreciating every year since 2015, and Cole was not the kind of man who needed a plan to be complete before he committed to it. What he had not fully calculated was what the borough would charge him every year to own a piece of ground with nothing on it except spruce trees and a rusted survey stake he found along the southeast corner of the day he walked the property with the seller. The Matanuska-Susitna borough assesses land at $3,840 in 2019. In 2020, the assessment climbed. In 2021, it climbed again. He was paying $320 a month for the right to own ground he had not yet broken. The $3,840 was not impossible on a pipeline wage. It was just wrong in the specific way that paying rent on something you already own is wrong. Quietly, persistently, without remedy in sight, Cole worked pipeline construction outside Wasilla at $28 an hour. After withholdings, fuel, food, and the ordinary cost of surviving in a place where everything arrives by barge or cargo plane. The tax bill was a number that made the rest of the math difficult. A permitted stick-built home in rural Alaska runs $250 to $400 per square foot, partly because lumber and hardware must be shipped north at freight rates that have no equivalent in the lower 48. A permitted structure also triggers a reassessment. Building legally on his land would raise the annual bill on top of construction costs. He started reading the borough assessor's classification manual on a slow Sunday afternoon at the Palmer Library in the spring of 2021. Not because someone suggested it, because he had a specific kind of irritation that makes a man want to understand the exact rule that is costing him money, and the manual was a public document available at the reference desk. The manual divided taxable property into 2 categories. Real property, any structure permanently affixed to land through a poured foundation, concrete piers, or a connection to municipal utilities. Personal property, anything titled and registered as a vehicle or mobile structure, taxed as a vehicle at a flat annual registration fee. He found a clause that most Alaskan landowners have never needed to read. He read it 3 times. And what he understood, sitting at a library table in Palmer on a Sunday afternoon, was that the structure he was about to build did not have to be a building at all. This is the part that surprises people who have spent years paying property tax on land they never build on. The distinction is not obscure. It is not a loophole in the sense of a technicality that lawyers argue over in courtrooms. It is a documented classification that Alaskan borough assessors apply every single day to RVs, fish camp structures on sled skids, mobile mining equipment, and agricultural trailers across the state. It has been applied this way for decades. Most landowners simply never had a reason to look for it. A house on a poured concrete slab is real property. A structure bolted to concrete piers driven into the ground is real property. Anything connected to municipal water, sewer, or electrical utilities is real property. The borough assessor assigns a value and bills you annually. That bill does not stop arriving until you sell, demolish, or die. Personal property is everything the state registers instead of assesses. Vehicles, snow machines, boat trailers, flatbed trailers. The Alaska DMV issues a registration certificate, charges a flat annual fee, and the borough assessor never touches it. No valuation, no annual increase, no building department record. The classification turns entirely on two things. First, whether the structure rests on a wheeled chassis. Second, whether that chassis carries a valid vehicle identification number issued by the Alaska DMV. If both conditions are met, the structure is personal property regardless of its size, its insulation, its interior finish, or how long it has sat in one place. A shipping container is not legally defined as a building anywhere in the United States. It is a cargo transport unit. It has no foundation by nature. It has no utility connections by default. It was designed from a first bolt to move across oceans on rail cars on flatbed trucks. Mounting one on a titled trailer chassis returns it to that original legal identity simultaneously in the eyes of the DMV, the borough assessor, and the code office. In the Matanuska-Susitna borough, the annual registration fee for a homemade trailer runs between $62 and $90 depending on declared weight. Cole confirmed this with a single phone call to the Palmer DMV office on a Tuesday morning before his shift started. The clerk answered in under a minute. She did not find a question unusual. He knew what he needed to find. The next question was where to find one cheap enough to make the numbers work in a state where everything costs more to move. A shipping container is not a rare object in Alaska. It is everywhere, and for a reason that most people who have never thought about freight logistics would not immediately grasp. Everything that enters the state arrives by container ship. The Port of Anchorage processes more containerized cargo per capita than almost any facility in the United States, because there is no other practical way to supply a population scattered across an area larger than Texas and California combined. Containers arrive loaded and leave empty, or arrive damaged and never leave at all. The surplus yards outside Anchorage and along the Seward Highway hold dozens of them at any given time, stacked on gravel lots behind chain link, salt-weathered and dented, in varying states of rust, sitting for months until someone decides what to do with them. Cole drove to a surplus yard outside Anchorage on a Saturday morning in August of 2021. The sky was flat and gray. The air smelled of diesel and inlet salt. A man in a yard office pointed him down the third row without looking up from his desk. A standard 20-foot container in clean condition sells for $2,500 to $4,000 in Alaska. A premium over lower 48 pricing, because transport to the state adds cost everything. But container with dented side panels, surface rust on the corner castings, or a warped door frame sells for far less. Commercial buyers will not accept cosmetic damage. They need containers that present cleanly, stack without gaps, and satisfy clients paying full price for full condition. Cole was not a commercial buyer. The container at the end of the third row had two dented wall panels on the starboard side, surface rust along both base rails where water had pooled during transit, and a door that needed adjustment to open cleanly. It had been sitting for 4 months. The yard had it priced at $450. He walked the full length of it. The corner casting welds were solid. The corrugated wall structure had not been penetrated. The dents were surface deformation only. The floor was marine-grade plywood, dry and without rot. He knocked on the wall with his knuckle in 3 places. The steel rang back the same way each time. The reason a container handles Alaska's climate in ways that a prefab shed or a wood frame structure does not comes down to how it was built and what it was built from. The ISO standard shipping container is engineered to stack 6 units high at sea while fully loaded. It handles snow loads that would collapse a residential roof in a single Alaskan storm. The steel is corten, a weathering alloy that forms a controlled oxidation layer on the surface, which stops further corrosion beneath it. In a climate that swings between minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit in January and 80 degrees Fahrenheit in July, that material science matters more than it does anywhere else on the continent. He paid cash for money he kept in an account he did not touch except for the land, and whatever the land required. A 20-foot shipping container weighs 4,800 pounds empty. A flatbed crane truck rental in the Mat-Su Valley runs $600 to $1,200 per day, and that assumes the operator has availability during late summer construction season, which he often does not. Cole solved it the same way he solved most problems during this period. He asked for help. A man he knew from a hunting camp outside Talkeetna drove a lowboy trailer for a heavy equipment company in Wasilla. The truck sat parked on weekends. The man agreed to haul the container to Cole's parcel on a Saturday for $60 in fuel and 2 cases of beer delivered once the job was done. The container arrived on a September morning, lowered onto frozen ground by the lowboy's hydraulic deck. It sat there on the gravel and dead grass looking exactly like what it was, a steel box in a field. What it would become was something else entirely. But before that, there was a trailer frame, and this is where the legal structure of the whole arrangement rests. A shipping container sitting directly on the ground is a building in the eyes of the borough assessor. A shipping container mounted on a titled trailer chassis with wheels attached is a vehicle. That distinction is the entire legal argument, and it depends on a piece of equipment Cole sourced from a farm equipment auction outside Palmer for $350. The trailer had a valid Alaska title. A valid title means of been already stamped on the frame by the state. That number does not disappear when a container is placed on top of it. It transfers to the combined structure. The attachment requires no welding and no modification to either the container or the trailer. An ISO shipping container has corner castings at all 8 corners. Standardized steel fittings used to lock containers to ships, rail cars, and truck chassis worldwide. Standard ISO twist locks thread directly into those castings and bolt to the trailer's stake pockets. Cole drove 8 twist locks home with a socket wrench over 2 hours on a cold afternoon. The container did not shift when he was done. Solar power in Alaska requires a different calculation than it does further south. Anchorage averages 5.5 hours of usable solar daylight in December. Fairbanks averages 3.7. Cole collected 4 damaged panels from solar installation companies in the Anchorage area. Panels operating at reduced output that companies discard because they cannot guarantee customers full performance. A panel producing 60% of rated output is worthless to a commercial installer guaranteeing full power. It is not worthless to a man who needs to run 4 LED strips and charge a phone. Both companies gave the panels away because electronic waste disposal cost them money. He supplemented the solar array with a used 400W wind turbine purchased from a man at a hunting equipment expo in Palmer for $120. Wind in the Matsu Valley is reliable precisely in the months when daylight is not. The 2 systems together cover what neither could manage alone. Battery bank. For used car batteries at $20 each from an auto salvage yard in Wasilla. Charge controller. $35 shipped to the Palmer post office. Wiring learned from a YouTube tutorial series he watched at the Matsu Borough Public Library, diagrams drawn on notebook paper, and carried back to the build site in his jacket pocket. Water comes from a 300-gallon insulated tank inside the container, inside the heated envelope, so it never freezes. Filled weekly at a self-service station in Palmer at 25 cents per gallon. At 5 gallons per day for one person, that is $9.10 per week, or $473 per year. The bathroom is a 2-bucket composting toilet with pine shavings from a feed store in Wasilla. Annual sanitation cost, approximately $45. Before this section is over, it is worth running the number that the next section will make official. Wood, $200. Propane, $190. Water, $473. Sanitation, $45. Solar and wind maintenance, $30. Miscellaneous, $50. That is $988 in total annual operating costs for heat, power, water, cooking, and sanitation. Add the vehicle registration, and the number rounds to just over $1,050 for the year. That figure is what the next envelope from the borough will be measured against. The first registration renewal arrived in the mail in the fall of 2022. Cole wrote a check for $62 and set it on the table next to the previous year's property tax bill. The 2 pieces of paper sat side by side for a moment. $3,840 and $62. He did not say anything about it. The numbers did not require commentary. The full annual housing cost now came to $1,050. Every category accounted for in a notebook he kept on the shelf above the camp stove. Vehicle registration, $62. Firewood, $200. Propane, $190. Water, $473. Sanitation, $45. System upkeep and miscellaneous, $80. That was it. That was the entire cost of living on land he owned in the Matanuska-Susitna borough for a full calendar year. The difference between $3,840 and $1,050 went to the land note. He paid it off 14 months ahead of schedule. He owns the 5 acres free and clear. No mortgage, no annual assessment, no building department record of a structure that the assessor has never been given a reason to visit. In the 2 years since the bill was finished, Cole has made the kind of improvements that come slowly, one salvage piece at a time. A covered entryway built from reclaimed lumber and corrugated steel roofing panels. A small cold air airlock that intercepts the temperature before it reaches the main door. The same principle used in Scandinavian building design for centuries. He found the roofing panels behind a demolished commercial building in Palmer and hauled them in the bed of his truck in 2 loads. The entryway took a weekend to frame and a Sunday afternoon to roof. It cut the heat loss every time the main door opened by more than half. A woodshed stands adjacent to the container, also mounted on its own small titled trailer, also registered as a vehicle, also outside the assessor's jurisdiction. He built it from the same salvaged lumber source, framed it in a single day, and filled it before the first hard freeze. A third salvaged solar panel went into the existing battery bank in the second summer, extending the system's evening run time by nearly an hour. 3 raised garden beds built from cinder blocks line the south wall of the container, where they catch afternoon light from April through September. He grows kale, tomatoes, and a variety of winter squash that stores on the shelving inside the container through November. The container has survived 4 Alaskan winters. The coldest recorded temperature on his property during that period was minus 52 degrees Fahrenheit. A night that collapsed a prefab storage shed on a neighboring parcel under accumulated snow load. The container held. The wood stove held. The insulation held. In the morning, the interior temperature had dropped to 52 degrees Fahrenheit, with no fire running overnight. He rebuilt the fire in 10 minutes. A neighbor 3 miles up the gravel road had noticed the structure during a winter drive. He stopped one afternoon and asked questions. Cole answered all of them. It seemed like the obvious thing to do. The neighbor billed as the following spring. He used a 40-foot container source from the same surplus yard, mounted on 2 connected flatbed trailer frames, both titled separately, registered as 2 vehicles on the same parcel. By the time his bill was finished, 2 other men on the same gravel road had started asking questions of their own. One of them had heard about it at a gun show in Wasilla from a man who sketched the trailer attachment method, the corner castings, the twist locks, the stake pockets, on the back of a hunting license application, and handed it across the table without being asked. The other had heard about it at a hardware store parking lot from a stranger loading corrugated roofing into a truck bed who mentioned, when asked about the container on his flatbed, where it had come from and what he planned to do with it. That is how this kind of knowledge moves in rural Alaska, not through websites or permit offices, through hunting camps and hardware store parking lots and conversations between men who are trying to solve a specific problem and have run out of patience with the conventional answers. At least 12 builds using this method have been documented across 3 Alaskan boroughs since Cole completed his, the Matanuska-Susitna borough, the Fairbanks North Star borough, and the Kenai Peninsula borough. The structures vary in size. Some are single 20-foot containers. Some are 40 feet. A few have added second containers on separate title trailers, each registered independently, each beneath the assessment threshold on its own. A borough assessor's office responded to a public records inquiry, confirming that structures mounted on titled mobile chassis are classified as personal property. The response was 2 sentences. The clerk did not appear to find the question unusual or the classification contested. A building official in a neighboring borough was asked directly where his jurisdiction ended. He said that if a structure has wheels and a VIN, it is a DMV matter, not his. He said the way you say something that has been true for a long time and has never needed to be argued. This works in rural Alaska for reasons that do not transfer at Anchorage or Juneau. Land with willing owners or outright ownership at prices that still exist outside city limits. Burrows with limited enforcement capacity across unorganized areas that cover thousands of square miles. Access to port surplus streams that produce containers at prices unavailable anywhere in the lower 48 at this volume. And neighbors who are more likely to help you level a trailer frame than report it. Every one of those conditions disappears inside city limits, which is why these structures exist quietly along gravel roads in places that do not appear on most maps, and why the people who live in them rarely advertise the fact. The property tax code was written by people who assumed everyone would build a permitted structure on a poured slab. Some people read the code carefully enough to notice it only said that if you did. Cole's son is 12. He visits on weekends from Anchorage, where he lives with his mother during the school year. He knows what every tool in the collection hanging inside the container door is called. He knows the corner castings are what connect the box to the trailer frame beneath it, and that the connection is what the whole legal structure rests on. Cole showed him the day they drove the first twist lock home with a socket wrench on a cold September afternoon. The kind of afternoon where your breath shows and the metal is too cold to touch without gloves. The boy asked if it was really that simple. His father said most things are once you read the right page. If resourcefulness like this matters to you, subscribing helps more people find this channel. The video on screen right now documents a completely different off-grid build with methods every bit as deliberate as these. Click it and keep going.